Now that we've talked about how to collect data, let's actually talk about what to do with it. And so this first idea is how to organize the data into some sort of usable format, and we're going to look at various graphical displays on how to do it. So a couple of keywords and terms that would be helpful to know is when we first collect the data, it's in what's called raw form. Raw data is any data that's not organized. We're going to go through how one organizes it. So one method is to do what's called a frequency distribution, and this is where we break the data up into its different categories and record how often something has occurred. Relative frequency is in reference to the total observations, what percent or what fraction of the observation is within that. And so the relative frequency is a simple little formula where we take the number of observations that something has occurred divided by the total sum of the observations. Okay. And then a relative frequency distribution is based on the percent or the fraction. What would the graphical display look like for it? And typically the frequency distribution and the relative frequency distribution are very similar to each other. And so we're gonna look at some various graphs here, starting with some raw data. And might as well, a Pareto chart is a bar graph, and where they've rearranged the graphs going from highest to lowest order, so descending order in terms of frequency or relative frequency. Okay, so let me go down to our first example of raw data and what one does with this. So here we've got a collection of M&Ms where we've just looked at various colors, and we're going to go through and record what types of colors we have and see if there's anything interesting out of this. So I'm going to start by just showing you what one does with the brown, and then I'll come back in and fill in the rest of the colors. But you really just go through and for your tallies, you're going to count. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so I counted 12 browns. So that's what you would write under your tally mark there. And it does kind of help to cross them off as you go, so you can kind of keep track of what has and hasn't happened yet. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up so it lets you kind of go back and count the yellows and the reds and the orange. So if you want to take a minute and do that, just go ahead and pause the video now, and then join me when you've got the tally marks completed. So as you've crossed these things off, hopefully you've kind of kept track of your tallies. So tallies would simply be as you find a occurrence of brown, you just make a little mark here that it showed up that many times. So you'll have a collection of these little lines that indicate you noticed that you saw that word. Frequency is simply counting up how many times that occurred. So I'm going to let you go in and do the other colors, and we'll talk about relative frequency here in a moment. So if you want to pause the video and then start it up after you've gone through and collected up the tallies and the frequencies of the other colors. Okay, so those are the rest of your tallies and frequencies for the rest of the colors. We're going to need to add this up here in a second. So as I sum this, 12 plus 10 plus 9 plus 6 plus 3 plus 5, I get 45. So we're going to use that to find the relative frequencies. So relative frequencies is what fraction or percent does this observation show up in the total overall data. So on the easy side, that's just putting the frequency over the sum. So 12 out of 45, 10 out of 45, 9 out of 45. Now I know these do reduce. We're going to come in a second and write down decimal approximations of all of these, since that's equivalent. Alright, so 12 out of 45 is about 0.267. And I'm just typing this in a calculator. So 0.22 is 0.2. 0.13, 0.0067, and 0.111. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to draw a frequency bar graph. And so what I'm going to notice, I'm going to set up a little chart. And at the bottom, I'm going to write brown, let's see, brown, yellow, red, orange, blue, and green. So each letter represents the color it corresponds to. Looks like the highest I need to go up is 12. So I'm going to count by fives. So 5, 10, up to 15 is the highest observation I need. And then I'm just going to draw a bar graph that represents that particular height. So brown would be height 12. Yellow would be height 10. Red would be height 9, so a little lower, but similar in height. Orange would be 6. Blue would be 3, so it would be the smallest of the bunch. And then green would be 5. Okay, so that would be our frequency bar graph. Relative frequency is kind of similar to frequency in that the bottom part, we keep the same labels. So blue, yellow, red, orange. I'm sorry, brown, yellow, red, orange, blue, and green. I'll add an extra letter here just so we're not confused by this. Now, instead of counting the frequencies, we're going to count the relative frequencies going up. So it looks like the 0.26, 0.27 is the highest. So I'm going to count by tenths for that. Now you're going to notice it's going to have a similar shape to it. So I need a rectangle that's got a height of 0.27. For yellow, it needs to be a height of 0.22. Let's see, red is 0.2, so a little bit smaller. Orange is 0.13. Blue is 0.07. And then green is 0.1. Okay, so notice it's essentially the same bar graph. The only difference is the height labels for the particular bars. The only change here. Now, adding into it the Pareto chart. A Pareto chart is essentially a bar graph, but it's been rearranged so it goes in descending order. So we just changed the order of, I guess, a couple of those. The last two bars actually just need to switch places. So, and it can be frequency or relative frequency. That part doesn't really matter. So we'll stick with that. Let's see. Brown is clearly the highest. Then we can kind of go back up and look at the numbers. Then we want yellow, red. So yellow, red. Let's see, then after red we want orange and then green and then blue. Orange, green, and blue. And so all it really did was switch the last two bars. But other than that, it's going to have the same sort of look. Except it'll be descending. I forgot what red was. Red was 9. orange was 6 and then 5. Okay, so that's really the only significant difference here.